Chapter 1. The Fight to the Death. The wolf pack was hungry. The ground was covered with snow. Nothing moved. There was nothing to eat. The she-wolf led the pack in their search for food. 3 male wolves kept close to her: a large gray wolf, an old wolf with one eye, and a 3-year-old. They all wanted to mate with her, but at that moment they could only think of food. The pack was very hungry, and if they did not find food soon, they would die. After many days of running across the snow, they finally saw a moose ahead of them. It was a large, strong animal, but the wolves attacked it. The pack made a circle around the moose. Even though it kicked and bit the wolves, badly hurting many of them, the moose became too weak to fight. The wolves leapt upon it, and it fell to the ground. Within seconds, the pack was feeding on the dead animal. When the wolves were full, they rested, and then they continued on their way. The pack divided into smaller packs. Some wolves went off in pairs. A few males went off alone. The large gray wolf, the old wolf with one eye, and the 3-year-old stayed with the she-wolf. Only the strongest one, who could fight and defeat the other 2, would mate with her. At first, the large gray wolf and the old wolf with one eye attacked and killed the 3-year-old. Then they fought one another. The old wolf with one eye bit the large gray wolf on the neck and killed him. During the fighting, the she-wolf sat quietly, watching and waiting to see who would become her mate. One eye went toward her, and she stood up. She ran off, and he followed her. It seemed that she was looking for something, but he did not know what. It was not long before they came to a Native American camp. There were men, women, and children in the camp. The 2 wolves sat outside the camp and watched for some time, then moved away. As they walked through the forest, One Eye saw a white animal ahead. He ran to catch it, but it leapt into the air. He could not reach it. He leapt into the air and caught the rabbit. He tried to take it back to the she-wolf, but could not. It was tied to a thin branch. The she-wolf was angry with her mate and bit him. She knew that the rabbit at the end of the branch was a snare. It was put there by the Native Americans. Snares could catch the foot of a wolf. She ran off, and One Eye followed her. He had learned a lesson that would be useful in the days ahead. Chapter 2. The Cave. The she-wolf and One Eye walked for 2 days. She was still searching for something. They came to a river. It was still frozen. Soon the sun would start shining and the world would become warmer. He began to understand what she was looking for. They came to the opening of a cave. The she-wolf went inside. One Eye waited at the mouth of the cave and lay in the sun. The she-wolf walked deeper into the cave. It was larger inside than at the opening. It was warm and dry. The opening was small enough for her to stop anything dangerous from coming inside. She lay down and rested. She had found what she was looking for. One Eye entered the cave, but the she-wolf growled at him, and he quickly backed out again. He was hungry, and he went off to hunt. He found wild animals, but he could not catch them. He was away from the cave for many hours. When he returned, he heard noises inside. He did not know what they were. He tried to enter the cave, but the she-wolf growled at him angrily. She now had 5 wolf cubs. She was afraid that One Eye would eat them. She knew that male wolves sometimes ate their cubs. One Eye was not that kind of wolf. He knew he had to find food for his mate and her cubs. He set off to hunt again. Before long, he saw a small animal. It was big enough to eat, but as he moved toward it, it rolled itself into a ball. One Eye knew what it was. It was a porcupine, an animal with sharp spines. When it is attacked, it shoots these spines at its attacker. Many years before, One Eye had tried to catch a porcupine. It had shot a spine into his nose. He had been in pain for many weeks. He moved on and looked for other small animals to eat. He came to the river bank. A large water bird was standing there. One Eye leapt at it and caught it. He was hungry and began to eat the bird. He remembered the she-wolf and her cubs in the cave. She needed food. He picked up the dead bird and began to carry it back to the cave. He returned to where he had seen the porcupine. Another animal was watching the porcupine. It was a lynx. The lynx was waiting for the right moment to attack the porcupine. One-Eye decided to watch and see what would happen. The porcupine thought it was safe and began to unroll. As soon as it had unrolled, the lynx sprang forward and tried to bite it. The porcupine quickly rolled itself up again and shot sharp spines into the lynx. The lynx leapt into the air in great pain and then ran off. One-Eye saw that the porcupine was badly hurt. He waited. The porcupine was only half rolled up. One-Eye could see a good place to bite it, but he waited until he was sure the porcupine was dead. Then he picked it up and carried it back to where he had left the dead bird. He quickly ate the bird and carried the dead porcupine back to the cave. The she-wolf let him come in with the food. She knew now that he was not the kind of mate who would eat the cubs. She knew he would take care of her and her family. Chapter 3. The Gray Cub. He was the only gray cub the she-wolf had. The other cubs had red in their hair. He was gray like his father. He was also the strongest cub. He showed more anger than his brothers and sisters. He made more noise. He was always trying to get to the light at the mouth of the cave. The she-wolf tried to keep him back and often hit him, knocking him down. He had to learn about hurt and danger. He learned many things in his first months of life. He learned not to walk into walls because when he did, the wall hurt his nose. He learned that there wasn't a wall at one end of the cave because his father walked through it. He never thought about why things happened. He knew only how and when they happened. This was enough for his wolf brain. At first, he lived on milk from the she-wolf, but she soon began to give him meat. Wolves live only on meat. If they cannot kill game, they cannot eat. At first, they lived on rabbits they stole from the Native American snares. But then the men moved away, taking their snares with them. There came a time when there was no meat. For many days the cubs did not eat. They were too weak and tired even to play. One-Eye, the cub's father, traveled far and wide searching for food. Even the she-wolf left the cave to find meat, but there was nothing. One by one, the cubs died, except for the Gray Cub. Only he lived. His father died too. He was killed in a fight with a lynx over food. The lynx had her own kittens to feed, and fought One-Eye to the death. Only the she-wolf and one cub were left, the Gray Cub. She had to leave him alone in the cave when she went to find food. The cub knew that he should not go to the light at the mouth of the cave. He did not know why he should not go, only that his mother hit him whenever he tried. He wanted to know how it was different from the other walls of the cave. One day, when his mother was out hunting, he walked slowly toward the mouth of the cave. At first he was afraid. When nothing happened after he entered the light, he stopped being afraid. There was so much to smell and see. He walked forward, and was surprised when he walked into nothing. The mouth of the cave opened on to the side of a cliff. He fell and fell and fell. He did not know what was happening to him. Then suddenly he landed on thick grass. He lay there for several moments, and then began to run. It seemed like the right thing to do. Chapter 4. The Law of Meat. There were living things and non-living things in the forest. He learned that most living things ran away from him, but that some turned and were ready to fight him. By accident, he ate some baby birds. He took one in his mouth and bit it. The taste was good. He ate it. Then he ate the other birds. They were the first meat he found for himself. He met an animal about his own size. It was a weasel, a rat-like animal. The weasel was not afraid of him. It ran at him and bit his throat. He tried to shake the weasel off, but it held on. The cub could not stop the weasel from biting him, and soon he was losing a lot of blood. He was nearly dead. The she-wolf arrived just in time. She had been looking for her cub. The weasel let go of the cub's throat and leapt at the she-wolf. She was stronger than the weasel, and she killed it and ate it. She bent down and took care of her cub. He followed her back to the cave where they both slept. When he felt strong again, he left the cave and went into the forest. He knew his way home, and he knew the forest could be dangerous. He was nearly killed by a large bird. It came out of the sky and took a squirrel near him. The bird was big and strong enough to take a cub. He knew he must watch out for it, or it would come out of the sky and take him. He began hunting for his own food, but he was not good at hunting yet. He still needed food from his mother. One day, she brought him a lynx kitten. He was eating it when he heard a great noise from the mouth of the cave. The kitten's mother had followed the she-wolf to the cave. The she-wolf and the she-lynx started to fight. They would fight to the death. The cub ran forward. He bit one of the lynx's legs. It was not a big bite, but it was enough to give the she-wolf the chance she needed. Soon the lynx was dead, but the she-wolf was badly hurt. For a week, she did not move. The gray cub had to find food for both of them. Without his mother to take care of him, he learned what life was about. It was about meat. Without meat, there was no life. Animals had to eat other animals to survive. The law was eat or be eaten. It was a hard life, but the cub was happy. He felt very much alive. Chapter 5. The Makers of Fire. The cub suddenly found himself near a Native American camp. One of the men saw him and came toward him. The cub was so afraid that he could not move. The man bent down and stroked the cub. This made the cub angry, and he bit the man. The man hit him very hard, and the cub cried out loud. The she-wolf heard her cub's cry and came running to the camp to help him. Immediately, one of the men saw her and knew who she was. He shouted, "Kiche!" at her. This was her name, and she remembered it. She sat down and waited to be told what to do. The man said,
"This animal was my brother's pet. When he died, she ran away. Her father was a wolf, but her mother was a dog. She learned to obey."
He walked up to Kiche and stroked her. She was pleased. She seemed to remember the man that was stroking her. The men were very nice to her. She liked men. They fed her and were kind to her. She let the man put a rope around her neck. She was used to being tied up. The man looked at the cub.
"He has very white fangs,"
he said to the other men.
"We'll call him White Fang. We'll take him and his mother with us."
Then many other men, women, and children arrived. They were moving camp. They were carrying everything they owned with them. They had dogs that also carried things. When the dogs saw Kiche and White Fang, they ran at them. Then the dogs started to fight. It was a bad fight. The men shouted at the dogs, but they would not stop fighting. They had to hit them with sticks and throw stones at them. At last they drove the dogs away from Kiche and White Fang. White Fang and his mother were tired from the fighting. The man who knew her looked at Kiche carefully.
"She has many bites,"
he told his friends.
"And so does the cub, but they will be all right. The dogs will soon accept them."
The Native Americans moved off. Soon they came to a river. There were many tents there. White Fang had never seen a tent before. He went up to it to smell it. A woman came out of the tent. She bent down and stroked him. She turned him on his back and stroked his throat. At first, he did not like this. He felt afraid lying on his back with his paws in the air. But slowly he began to enjoy being stroked. The woman went back into the tent. A dog came up to White Fang. His name was Lip Lip. He was not much older than White Fang, but he was always fighting. He attacked White Fang, and soon the two animals were fighting. Kiche came up and attacked Lip Lip. Men came with sticks to stop the animals from fighting. Again, White Fang had bites that hurt. Later that day, some men began putting small branches and leaves into a pile. White Fang watched. He did not know what they were doing. Soon smoke came from the fire. White Fang had never seen fire before. He did not know what it was or what it could do. He went up to it to smell it. He put his nose into the fire. The pain was very bad. He ran away from the fire to Kitche. She knew what had happened and licked the burns. White Fang learned that men could make this thing that hurt so much. He believed that they were all powerful. Chapter 6. White Fang and Lip Lip. White Fang had made an enemy of Lip Lip. The dog attacked him whenever he could. He was bigger and stronger than White Fang, and always won their fights. White Fang knew that he could never win a fight against Lip Lip. He knew that he had to do something else to teach the dog a lesson. Most of the time, however, White Fang was happy. His mother was tied up because the men did not want her to run away again, but he was able to be with her whenever he wanted. There was always meat to eat, and the women were kind to him. Only Lip Lip made him unhappy. He decided to do something about this bad-tempered dog. One day, he pretended to be hurt and unable to run fast. Lip Lip ran after him. White Fang stayed just in front of him. White Fang led Lip Lip toward the place where Kitche was tied up. Although she was tied up, she was able to bite Lip Lip. She turned him over and bit him many times. Lip Lip ran away when Kitche let him go, but White Fang's problem with him was not over. Lip Lip was the leader of the other dogs. They followed him and obeyed him. None of them would become friends with White Fang. Whenever he came near them, they attacked him. They knew that he was not a real dog. White Fang was always alone. He was never allowed to play with the other dogs. This made him unhappy and angry. He often forgot how to behave well. One day, one of the men went on a journey in a small boat and took Kitche with him. White Fang tried to follow. He jumped into the river and swam after the boat. Another man came after White Fang in his boat. He lifted White Fang out of the water. White Fang tried to get away from the man, but the man hit him and threw him into the bottom of the boat. When they reached the land, the man bent down to lift White Fang out of the canoe. White Fang was now very angry because he wanted to be with his mother. He forgot how powerful men were, and he bit the man. The man was so angry that he beat White Fang again and again. He hurt him badly. White Fang finally learned that he must never bite a man because if he did, he would be beaten very badly. Chapter 7. Alone. At the end of summer, the Native Americans began to pack up their camp. It was time to move on. White Fang knew something different was going to happen. He decided to hide. He found a good hiding place near the camp and waited there. The men called to him, but he did not obey. They came looking for him, but did not find him. He waited in his hiding place, shaking because he was afraid. He believed that if they found him, he would get a beating. At last they went away. White Fang was alone. Now he began to be really afraid. He had no mother to care for him. There were no men to throw him food. There was no warm tent to sleep in. There was only the forest, full of strange noises and movements. Suddenly the moon went behind a cloud. White Fang was in darkness. There was a movement behind a tree. He wondered if it was a lynx, the same animal that had killed his father. He started to run. He did not know where he was going. He only knew that he had to keep moving. After many hours, he came to where the Native Americans had camped the night before. There was no one there, but White Fang could smell men. He followed where his nose led him. For more than 30 hours, he ran without stopping. He ran along the riverbank and through icy streams that flowed into the river. He pushed his way through thick bushes. He became wet, cold, and very tired. He sat down and looked up at the sky. He opened his mouth and howled. It was his first real wolf howl. White Fang was too young to understand that man knows how to cross rivers, so he did not try to cross the river. It was lucky he did not cross it, because the Native Americans set up their new camp on the same side of the river. At last, White Fang came to it. He saw the smoke from their fires. He smelled the cooking meat. He heard them talking. More than anything, he wanted to go back to the camp, where it was warm and there was food. He knew he had been wrong to run away. He was sure he would get a beating. Keeping low to the ground, he moved slowly into the camp. The man who had looked after him and beat him often was sitting by the fire. White Fang moved very, very slowly toward him. He expected a bad beating, but the man looked up and tore a piece of meat from his own meal. Then he threw it to White Fang. The cub ate it quickly, then lay down in front of the fire and closed his eyes. He was safe and back home. Chapter 8. The Law of the Gods. The Native American who looked after White Fang was called Gray Beaver. He did not keep White Fang as a pet. He never showed him any love. To Gray Beaver, White Fang was an animal who could be useful and nothing more. When White Fang behaved well, he was fed meat. When he behaved badly, he was beaten. To White Fang, Gray Beaver, and all the other men were like gods. They had power over him. They had to be obeyed, or they would beat him. White Fang did not get love from them. He did not expect it. He only asked for meat and a warm place to sleep. He had not known love since his mother Kitche had left. He had no friends among the dogs. Lip Lip was his enemy and the leader of the other dogs, who all obeyed him. White Fang never played with other dogs. He was always alone. The time came for the tribe to move camp again. This time, they loaded their tents and everything they owned onto a large sled. Then they used the dogs to pull this sled. The dogs were tied together with ropes. The leader of the dogs was Lip Lip. He was at the front of the pack. As they pulled the sled, the other dogs only saw Lip Lip's back. It was as if he was running away from them. They lost their fear of him and turned on him, as he had turned on them. After the other dogs lost respect for Lip Lip, they needed a new leader. They would have been happy to let White Fang be the leader, but he did not want to lead the pack. He was a strong, often angry animal whose only wish was to obey Gray Beaver, his god. He was a good sled dog because he was strong and always obedient. One day the tribe camped near a village. White Fang went into the village and saw a boy cutting up meat. A piece of the meat fell to the ground. White Fang took it. The boy picked up a large stick and began to walk toward White Fang, shouting at him. White Fang backed away between two tents. Behind him was a wall of earth. He could not get away. He was trapped. Almost without thinking, he leapt at the boy and knocked him down. Then he bit the boy. He was afraid, so he ran back to camp. He knew he had done wrong. He had broken one of the laws. Man must not be attacked. He expected Gray Beaver to beat him, but when the boy's angry parents came to tell Gray Beaver what White Fang had done, Gray Beaver sent them away. The next day, Mitsaw, Gray Beaver's son, was collecting sticks in the forest. The boy whom White Fang had bitten came into the forest with other boys from the village. They attacked Mitsaw. White Fang knew what he had to do. He ran at the boys, and within seconds they were running away, bleeding from his bites. When Gray Beaver arrived and saw what White Fang had done, he gave him as much meat as he could eat. White Fang learned from this that it was his work to protect Gray Beaver and the other people in their tribe. In return, they would feed him and look after him. Chapter 9. The Famine. White Fang was almost fully grown. He had no more problems with Lip Lip, who stayed away from him. The other young dogs knew that he was dangerous, and they also kept away from him. Even the older dogs, such as Basik, avoided fighting him. One day, however, when White Fang was eating a large piece of meat, Basik forgot how dangerous White Fang could be. He ran at White Fang and tried to steal the piece of meat. White Fang attacked him and drove him away. Then, as if remembering that Basik could also be dangerous, White Fang moved away. Basik then made a bad mistake. Thinking that he had won the fight, he tried again to steal the piece of meat. White Fang attacked him again, and did not just drive the older dog away. He bit him many times, and tore one of his ears badly. Bosik knew he was beaten and went away. A short time after this, White Fang went with Gray Beaver to visit another village. Quiche was there with her new cubs. White Fang remembered who she was, his mother. He ran up to her, but she did not remember him. She-wolves do not remember their own cubs' smell after a time. She thought he was a dangerous wolf trying to take her cubs. She attacked White Fang, biting him badly. The months passed, and White Fang grew bigger and stronger. All the dogs were afraid of him. He was always alone, or with his god Beaver. When White Fang was 3 years old, there was a bad famine. There was nothing to eat. The dogs began to eat other dogs. Then the men began to eat their dogs. Afraid, the dogs ran off into the forest, where they sometimes died of hunger. White Fang, too, went into the forest. He was able to catch small animals such as squirrels, better than the dogs could. He was a quarter wolf and had learned how to hunt when he was a cub. He was even able to kill an old wolf, weakened by hunger. One day, while he was trying to find food in a village, he saw Lip Lip. He attacked him, and they fought for a long time. White Fang was stronger now and killed Lip Lip. That dog would never trouble him again. There were no people or any food in the village, and he moved on. He traveled for many days until he came to another village. This one was different. There was the smell of food. There were the sounds of happy people and animals. Gray Beaver was not there, but his wife, Clucooch, was. She welcomed White Fang with a meal of fish. The famine was over for him. Chapter 10. Sled Dog. White Fang was the lead dog of the pack that pulled the sled. He stopped running when he was told to stop, and started when he was told to start. The other dogs had to follow him. If they did not, Gray Beaver hit them. The dogs hated White Fang because he was the leader and because he was stronger than they were. The only way they could protect themselves from his anger was by fighting him in a pack. A dog on its own had no chance. There came a time when Gray Beaver decided to visit a place where there were white men. This was the time of the gold rush in the Yukon. White men came from all over North America to look for gold. They came by boat on the Hudson River as far as Fort Yukon. They left their boats there and continued on foot, with their dogs, to the gold fields. Gray Beaver had many things to sell to them. He had furs, shoes, and clothing made of animal skins. He stayed at Fort Yukon for many days and became rich from selling things to the men who were looking for gold. The dogs these men brought with them were not like the dogs of the Native Americans. They were smaller and weaker. They were not as brave. They did not fight in packs. White Fang attacked and killed many of them. Other dogs from their tribe also killed the white men's dogs. One white man had a gun. He shot and killed 6 of Gray Beaver's dogs. He did not kill White Fang, however. White Fang was clever enough to keep out of his way. White Fang knew that somehow white men were different from the Native Americans. He knew that they could do things that the men in his tribe could not do. The white men quickly learned that White Fang was not like the other dogs. They could see that there was a wolf in him. They did not try to touch him the way they touched and stroked their own dogs. No one had ever loved White Fang. He obeyed Gray Beaver because Gray Beaver was a god to him, not because he liked him. White Fang had no friends among the other dogs. All dogs, all men, and all animals were his enemies. He was the enemy of everything and everyone. There was no kindness in White Fang, no gentleness. He was angry, dangerous, and a killer of anything weaker than himself. Chapter 11. The Mad God. Some of the white men had lived at Fort Yukon for several years. They thought themselves to be more important than the newcomers who arrived on the boat. They liked to watch the Native Americans' dogs, especially White Fang, attack and kill the newcomers' dogs. They thought this was a fun sport. One of these men was called Beauty. The other men called him Beauty because he was a very ugly and a very bad man. He liked to watch White Fang kill smaller, weaker dogs. Beauty had a small head and a big body, and he was weak and dirty. He was not brave at all. He did many of the worst jobs in the town. He also did most of the cooking. This was the only job he could do well. Beauty asked Gray Beaver to sell White Fang to him. At first, Gray Beaver would not sell White Fang. White Fang was too useful, and Gray Beaver did not need the money. But after several months, Gray Beaver had spent most of his money. One day, Beauty said he would give Gray Beaver many bottles of whiskey for White Fang. Gray Beaver liked whiskey too much to say no. He sold White Fang to Beauty. Gray Beaver tied a rope around White Fang's neck. He handed the rope to Beauty. The ugly man took the rope and pulled. White Fang leapt at him and tried to bite him. Beauty let go of the rope and went to get a large stick. He came back with it and hit White Fang so hard that the dog fell to the ground. Beauty took White Fang back to his hut. Every day, he gave the dog a beating. These beatings were the worst that White Fang had ever had. Beauty enjoyed hurting the dog. He liked giving an animal pain. He was a very ugly, bad man. White Fang tried to run away and returned to Gray Beaver. One night he was able to bite through the rope that held him. He ran to Gray Beaver's tent. He hoped Gray Beaver would save him from Beauty, but Gray Beaver took him back to his new owner. Beauty beat White Fang more severely than anyone had ever beaten him before. White Fang was half blind and could hardly walk after he was beaten. Gray Beaver had been a nice god to White Fang. Beauty was a mad god. Almost beaten to death daily by this bad man, White Fang became more dangerous to other dogs. He was even dangerous to other men, and had to be tied up all the time. Beauty used White Fang as a fighting dog. He became famous as the Fighting Wolf, and men came from near and far to watch him fight other dogs. Beauty charged men to see him, and gave him no rest. After a time, the other men stopped letting White Fang fight their dogs. They knew their dogs would lose. Beauty had to get wolves for White Fang to fight. One day White Fang had to fight a lynx, which nearly killed him. He took a long time to heal and did not fight again until a man brought a bulldog to the town. Chapter 12. A New God. The bulldog's name was Cherokee, and his owner was Tom Keenan. As soon as he arrived, all the men knew there would be a fight between Cherokee and White Fang. Beauty was sure White Fang would win, and so were many of the men. They began to bet on the fight. Beauty was sure he would win a lot of money. At first, it looked as if White Fang would win easily. Although Cherokee was a big dog, he was not tall, and his body was on short legs and near the ground. He could not move as fast as White Fang. White Fang expected him to fight the way other dogs fought. They attacked one another, bit, and then held on. At first, Cherokee did not fight this way. When White Fang attacked, Cherokee moved back, and White Fang found it difficult to bite him. Then, when White Fang did bite him and held on, Cherokee did not try to escape. Even though he was bleeding and his ear was torn, he let White Fang hold on. He turned around and around in circles, while White Fang held on. White Fang did not understand this dog. Cherokee did not seem to care that he was bleeding. White Fang attacked him again and again, but the bulldog did not attack or try to run away. It was as if he was waiting for his chance and would let White Fang hurt him until this chance came. At last, Cherokee's chance did come. White Fang leapt at Cherokee. Cherokee lay down. White Fang passed over his head. Cherokee bit White Fang's throat as he passed over him. White Fang tried to shake Cherokee off, but now the dog held on. It did not matter what White Fang did. The bulldog held on, biting deeper and deeper into his throat. Soon, White Fang was lying on his back with Cherokee standing over him, his teeth deep in his throat. Blood poured from him. Beauty walked toward the two dogs. He began kicking White Fang to make him fight. but the dog had lost a lot of blood and was very weak. The men who had bet money on Cherokee were shouting. They were happy. Beauty was very angry. He kept kicking White Fang. While this was going on, two men arrived on a sled pulled by dogs. One was called Scott, and the other was called Matt. Scott hurried toward Beauty.
"Stop that!"
he shouted. Beauty continued kicking White Fang while Cherokee kept holding on. Scott was very angry. He shouted at Beauty and knocked him down. All the men stopped shouting. They knew the dog fight was over, and there would be a fight between two men. Beauty stood up and shouted at Scott to mind his own business. Scott knocked him down again. Beauty was not a brave man, so he did not try to fight Scott. Scott had heard about White Fang. He knew he was one of the best lead sled dogs ever.
"I'll buy that dog from you,"
he told Beauty.
$150. "He's worth more than that to me,"
Beauty shouted.
"I want $300. "You'll take 150,
Scott said. He bent down and tried to separate the two dogs, but the bulldog still held on. Scott shouted at Tom Keenan to help him.
"I don't know how to separate them,"
Keenan said.
"This has never happened before."
Scott asked Matt for his gun. He began to push part of the gun into the bulldog's mouth as he tried to open it.
"Don't break his teeth,"
Keenan shouted. Scott paid no attention to him. At last, he got the bulldog to open its mouth. Matt came forward and pulled White Fang away. The wolf dog was now almost dead from his wounds and loss of blood. Chapter 13. Learning to Love. White Fang slowly got better, and during this time he did not let anyone near him.
"He's going to be useless,"
Scott said to Matt.
"I've wasted my money. I'll waste more on meat for him if I keep him. I'll get my gun and shoot him."
"Give him more time," Matt said. "He doesn't like you because of that man Beauty. He needs to learn that we won't hurt him." Slowly he walked toward White Fang. Immediately the dog leapt at him, and his teeth tore at Matt's hand.
"I told you he was useless,"
Scott said.
"We can't keep him."
"That was my fault," Matt said. "I should have waited. Let's give him more time." Scott agreed. A few days later he tried to touch White Fang. He, too, got badly bitten. Instead of making him angry with the dog, however, this helped Scott understand White Fang better. Now Matt wanted to shoot the dog because he thought White Fang was too dangerous, but Scott wanted to keep him.
"His wounds are almost better,"
Scott said.
"He's big and strong, and he's worked as a lead sled dog. We need a dog like this. I'm going to keep on trying."
He walked slowly toward White Fang, holding a piece of meat. When he was quite near the dog, he dropped the meat on the ground and walked away from it. White Fang looked at it. He looked at Scott. He moved toward the meat, expecting Scott to hit him. When Scott did not move, White Fang moved closer to the meat. He still expected Scott to hit him, but Scott did not move. White Fang ate the meat. The next day, Scott held the meat in his hand when he offered it to White Fang. The dog would not take it, so Scott left it on the ground. The same thing happened for many days. Finally, White Fang was not afraid of Scott and took a piece of meat from his hand. Scott let White Fang do this several times. Then he walked up to him without any meat in his hand. He put out his hand and touched White Fang. The wolf in White Fang wanted to bite the hand, but the dog in him wanted to obey the man. White Fang growled, but he did not bite. Every day Scott touched the dog. White Fang began to like being touched. He began to like this god who gave him meat, touched him gently, and never beat him. He knew that this god was different from all the others. As the days passed, White Fang began to love Scott. Then Scott went away. White Fang did not understand why this god that he had such strong feelings for did not come to him. He stopped eating. He lay quietly, without moving. He was very sad because Scott never came. Matt wrote a letter to Scott. He told him that if he did not come back very soon, White Fang would die. When Scott returned, he walked up to White Fang. For the first time in the dog's life, he wagged his tail. Scott gave him meat, and he ate it immediately. That night, while Scott and Matt were talking in their hut, they heard a noise. They ran outside. White Fang, who was allowed to walk free, was biting the arm of a man. Scott ran forward. The man was Beauty. White Fang was trying to kill him. Scott pulled White Fang off Beauty.
"You tried to steal him!"
Scott shouted at Beauty.
"Go away and never come back. If you do, I'll let White Fang do what he wants to you."
Beauty went away. Scott stroked White Fang. The dog wagged his tail. Chapter 14. A Different World. The time came when Scott had to leave the Yukon and return to his home in San Francisco. He began packing his things. White Fang did not know what was happening, but he felt that it was not good. He remembered how once before Scott had left. He had missed Scott badly and had stopped eating. He knew that Scott was going away. He lifted his head and let out a long wolf howl of sadness. "He knows you're leaving," Matt said to Scott.
"I know. He knows that when I pack my bags, I'm going away. I'd like to take him with me, but I can't. He's still mostly wolf, and he'll kill any dog he meets. If he does that just once in California, the police will catch him, take him away, and kill him. I don't want that to happen. You look after him for me."
"Remember what happened last time?" Matt asked. "He wouldn't eat. He nearly died."
"I know. The problem is that he loves me. He lives to be with me now."
He bent down and stroked White Fang. The dangerous animal that killed any dog that came near him put his head near Scott's and wagged his tail.
"I'm sorry, White Fang,"
Scott said,
"but you can't come with me."
He turned to Matt.
"We'll have to lock him up until after my boat has left."
Scott locked White Fang in one of the rooms of their hut, and then he and Matt went down to the river where a boat was waiting. Scott got into the boat, and Matt helped carry his bags. The two men stood talking for a few minutes. Then Scott looked around. White Fang was on the boat, looking at them.
"How did he get out?"
Scott asked. "I locked the door," Matt said. "There's no way he could get out."
"Come here,"
Scott told White Fang. The dog moved slowly towards Scott.
"There's blood on his nose,"
Scott said.
"Do you know what he did, Matt? He leapt at the window, broke the glass with his head, and pushed himself through the broken glass."
"He must want to be with you very much," Matt said. Scott looked at White Fang for a long time, and then he said,
"I'm taking him with me. I know I'm going to have problems, but I can't leave him behind."
"I think you're mad," Matt said. "Write to me and let me know how you're doing." White Fang was not happy on the journey to San Francisco. He was very afraid when they arrived in the city. There was so much noise and so many people. He did not know how to behave. He knew only that he must take care of his God and of his God's things. When they arrived at Scott's home, Scott's mother walked toward Scott to put her arms around her son. White Fang thought she was going to hurt his God. He leapt at her. Scott got between the dog and his mother just in time.
"It's all right, Mother,"
he said.
"White Fang will be okay when he gets to know you."
Scott's mother had two dogs, a female sheepdog called Collie and a male dog named Dick. White Fang did not attack Collie. He knew she was female and that he must not attack her. He immediately attacked Dick, however, and it was only because Collie helped Dick that White Fang did not kill him. Scott knew that his troubles had only just begun. Chapter 15. The Last Fight. Life was very different at Scott's home. Scott lived with his father, a judge, his mother Alice, and his sister Beth. There were other animals as well, such as cats and chickens. White Fang had to learn that the other people in the house were friends, and that he must not attack the chickens or cats. One day, he got into the chicken house. He killed 50 of the birds. He thought he was very clever. When Scott found out, He was angry with White Fang. He did not beat him badly, but he pushed his head at the dead birds and hit White Fang at the same time. This way, White Fang knew he had done wrong.
"The animal is a wolf," Scott's father said. "You'll never teach him not to kill chickens."
"He won't attack another chicken,"
Scott said.
"Will you make a bet with me?"
The judge agreed, and the two men had a bet.
"I'll lock White Fang in the chicken house,"
Scott said.
"He can stay there all night. In the morning, not one chicken will be dead."
And this was what happened. White Fang behaved as if there were no chickens in the chicken house. He had learned his lesson. Shortly after Scott came back home from the Yukon, a dangerous man escaped from prison. His name was Jim Hall, and he had killed many men. He wanted to kill the judge, who had sent him to prison. This was Scott's father. By this time, everyone in Scott's family liked White Fang. They felt safe with him because he knew them. They were also his gods. Alice allowed him to sleep in the house at night, even though he was not a house dog. One night, shortly after Jim Hall escaped, he got into the house. He had a gun, and his plan was to shoot the judge while he slept. However, White Fang heard a noise and went to see what it was. He saw and smelled a strange man. He knew that this man was not a friend and leapt at him. A fight went on for a long time. Jim Hall shot White Fang several times, but White Fang would not let go of him. He held on to his throat with his teeth. The noise woke everyone up. The police came and took Jim Hall back to prison. White Fang's wounds were very bad, and he was dying. Scott sent for a doctor, who looked at White Fang and said,
"He has only one chance in 1,000 of living."
"We must make sure he has that chance,"
Scott said.
"He saved my father's life. We must save him. I don't care how much it costs."
The doctor did everything he could for White Fang, but he had lost a lot of blood. He had a broken leg, and there were bullet holes in his chest. It seemed certain that he would die, but as the days passed, White Fang slowly got better. He lived, but he could not fight again. He lived the rest of his life quietly with Scott and his family, a much gentler and much loved wolf dog.
"That man is giving that dog a bad beating."
"It's cruel. I don't care what the dog has done wrong. No animal should be beaten like that. Stop that! Stop it! You mind your own business. Stop it! What has the dog done wrong? He cost me money. He let that bulldog beat him. Bulldogs never let go. That's why people keep them. Now stop hitting your dog." "He's not a dog. He's a wolf." "I warned you." "Matt, take hold of the dog. Be careful. He's hurt, but he may still bite you. He's afraid, and frightened dogs often bite." "I'll tell the police what you've just done to me." "If you do, I'll tell them what you were doing to your dog. How much do you want for him?" $300. "That's too much." "He's a good sled dog. His name is White Fang. He'll lead the others." "I'll give you $150 for him." "That's not enough." "It's all you are going to get." "Come on, Matt. Bring the dog. We've nothing more to say to this man."
"What will you do with the dog? He's at least half wolf. You'll never tame him."
"Oh, yes, I will. He just needs a little love."
"Are you okay?"
"You're right. I'll never tame him. I'd better shoot him before he kills somebody."
"Don't do that yet, Scott. Give him a chance. He's been badly beaten. He needs time to learn that you won't hurt him."
"I must go back to San Francisco for a few weeks. I'll work hard to make White Fang trust me before I go. But what will happen to him while I am gone?"
"I'll look after the dog for you."
"Okay, but be careful."
"It's good to see you. Did you have a good journey?"
"Very good."
"Was everything okay at home?"
"Yes, my parents and sister are all well. Where's White Fang?"
"I'm afraid I have bad news."
"What's happened? Has he attacked someone?"
"Nothing like that. He won't eat. He's so thin you can hardly see him. He just sleeps all the time."
"Is he ill?"
"He misses you. You spent a lot of time with him. You gave him love. He's never had love like that before. He lives to obey you and to be with you. When you are not here, life has no meaning for him.
I had no idea. I really care about White Fang, but I have to go back to San Francisco and stay there, Matt.
White Fang will die if you don't take him with you.
You're right, but I don't know what he'll be like there. It's a noisy city full of people.
He may be all right, but it's possible that he won't be able to behave.
What kind of dog is that, Scott?
He's half dog and half wolf.
I think he's dangerous. He looks as if he is going to attack us.
He'll get used to you. Don't go near him for a while. I'll keep him tied up until I'm sure he won't hurt anyone.
Why do you want an animal like that? You've got a dog. Collie is a lovely dog. She's not going to like White Fang. She'll attack him.
He'll kill Collie.
No, she's a female. He won't attack a female dog.
He'll kill the chickens if you don't keep him tied up all the time.
I'll teach him not to.
You can have a month to teach him how to behave. If we have any trouble with him after that, he must go.
I agree. Do you understand, White Fang? You must learn how to behave with people. Do you think you can do that? I'm willing to make a bet that he'll be a good dog.